Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Wigmore Hall, whether you're with us in the hall this afternoon or indeed watching us in distant places online. And I'm delighted to have with me on this famous stage John Gilhooly, who is Artistic and Executive Director of Wigmore Hall, to talk about the new 2019-2020 programme, which we officially launched today. But before we say any more, I'd like to thank the Elias Quartet for that wonderful performance of Schubert's Rosamunde Quartet, and John will be talking about the Elias a little bit more. In fact, we'll be talking a lot this afternoon about music and musicians. But there is one other group of people without whom the Wigmore Hall simply could not survive.
Indeed. It's the audience. It's everybody here and everybody watching online. And it's been a tremendous journey over the past 15 or more years with this audience as it's expanded in every area. And we've raised something in the region of £50 million from the audience in that period. And it costs £7 million a year now to run this hall. We need to bring in about £4.5 million in ticket sales. We get £300,000 from the Arts Council. And then we need to bring in about £2 million in fundraising. And you have never let us down. And it's that generosity, that huge generosity, that underpins the concert programme of 1,000 events, more than 500 concerts and 500 learning, education, outreach events. So that's absolutely wonderful and a testament to your loyalty as an audience and the love that everybody has for this place.
Absolutely, and we'll be talking more about donations and how to donate a little bit later. But back to the 2019-2020 programme, and one composer very close to my heart is going to feature strongly because it's the 250th anniversary of his birth next year. How are you planning to celebrate Ludwig van Beethoven?
Well, Beethoven was born into a time of political upheaval and social unrest. And this morning I thought, well, what's changed 250 years later? It's best to name some of the names, I think. James Enez in the violin sonatas, Miklos Perenyi, accompanied by Denis Varian, two wonderful Hungarian musicians in the cello sonatas, the Belcher Quartet in the quartets, and Jonathan Biss in the piano sonatas. Across our Sunday morning, our coffee concert, we still call it Coffee Concert Series, we'll do the piano trios, because I think it's very important that we spread Beethoven right across the season, and we'll also do some of the songs and the string trios. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Yes, sounds to me like a comprehensive account of all his chamber works?
More or less everything. And it's the first time we'll have done that here.
Amazing. And you're kicking it off with a special Beethoven weekend.
Yes, and you're part of that. Yes, indeed. So that's the 14th and 15th of September. We've got 10 concerts which place Beethoven in context of all that went before and everything that's come after. And we also reflect on Beethoven's disability, on the fact that he had profound hearing loss. And that allows us to contemplate how we listen to music as audiences, as performers, as composers, the role of the composer, because composers are often misunderstood. The average person on the street probably doesn't know how a composer works or makes a living. So we want to put a spotlight on all of that, and also to embrace as wide a demographic as possible, because I chair the Royal Philharmonic Society, and they commissioned Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for £50 many, many years ago. I think it was the best £50 ever spent in classical music. But equally, there were public collections here in London to send money to Beethoven because he needed money. He was impoverished in Vienna. And a special bust was created in Vienna to thank the people of London for that. And one of the artists in the Beethoven series, Jonathan Biss, has asked, and this came directly from him, to give a special concert for refugees, because we work with refugees, particularly at the Cardinal Hume Centre, in this time when so many are dispossessed and displaced and destitute, that we should think of those people, because Beethoven had hard times too. So everything links in together, and we'll do that special fundraiser for our work, our very valuable work, with that part of society.
Yes, well, plenty of Beethoven, but not just Beethoven. Haydn, Schumann songs, female composers, past and present, they all feature in the new programme.
Yes, Freya Whaley Cohen is well known to audiences here and picking up a very good international reputation. We'll look at her response to Beethoven here, and a neglected composer of the past, Rebecca Clarke, who wrote 52 wonderful songs, and partly neglected because she spent a great amount of time in the States, but female composers in the 20th century here in Britain didn't really get the spotlight. So we can do something to repair that with a bit of a retrospective. And also she wrote a wonderful work for viola in 1919, which can also be played on cello. So Raphael Waldfisch with John York and Eilish Tynan would put that concert on here. And we very much look forward to that. Haydn, the Opus 20 quartets in one evening with the St. Lawrence Quartet. So it's interesting to get a perspective of Haydn from a North American quartet, not just the Viennese tradition. And also a day of Haydn piano music on the 31st of May, which is coincidentally the anniversary of Haydn's death, but also the 31st of May is a very special day for us here because it was on that day in 1901 that this hall opened. And I'm very often asked, is it true that the audience, some of the audience were around for that opening? That's very much fake news. And looking out in front of me today, I can see that it is.
Now, what is not fake news is a composer since then closely associated with this hall that you'll be celebrating in the new programme, Benjamin Britten.
Indeed, Britten had a huge association with Wigmore Hall. And before he set up Aldeburgh, at least 20 of his works were premiered here. Famously, during the war, the Serenade for Tenor, Horn and Strings. So we're going to do that on the 4th of December with Alan Clayton. And the whole Britten project, the Britten Song Project, is built around Alan Clayton as that Peter Pears, as that central tenor figure, of course, who inspired Britten so much. So we're going to do all the song cycles. Louise Alder, Katrina Morrison, and Christopher Maltman and others will also take part. And the string quartets from the Doric String Quartet, who play them marvellously. And I was reminded last week that it was the 70th anniversary, just a few days ago, of when the Amadeus Quartet, and remember, they were a group of refugees who made their home here and contributed, like so many others of that Jewish diaspora, who came to London and did so much. So when people talk about not letting in people, and music should have no borders. That's absolutely true. But anyway, the Amadeus Quartet played the third string quartet of Britten to him on his deathbed in Aldeburgh in the Red House, and he told them it was marvellous. But according to another witness in the room, the minute they had gone out the door, he said it was dreadful. So we never know the real story of the third quartet, but it is a marvellous work. In fact, all three of Britten's numbered string quartets are wonderful, and it's a great way to hear them. And we will also have some words from Death in Venice, because the third quartet is very much Britten looking back on his life, and you can hear the bells of Venice, I'm convinced. And the cello in the final movement is almost like the heartbeat getting slower and slower. It's deeply moving stuff.
Now, John, the next season, 2019-2020, I happen to know, we've been chatting backstage, over 500 concerts, and you are carrying them one way or another, all of them in your head. Not just that, but the season afterwards and the season after that. How on earth do you do that? How do you plan a season? What goes through your mind?
Well, there's a lot of rigor, because it starts as a blank canvas, obviously. It starts, the diary for 2022 is kind of empty at the moment, so that's daunting. But you look at what's gone before. No two seasons must look the same. Obviously, you take account of what you think the public want to hear, but equally you introduce something that's valuable in musical terms for the nation, because this is the central chamber music venue for the nation. And for instance, next season we will cover begin to cover the entire string quartet output of Weinberg, who was a Polish Soviet Jewish composer, not very well known, 17 really good string quartets, already committed to recording by the Donnell Quartet. So I've asked the Donnell Quartet to pair that with Shostakovich across the season. And that's a huge investment. It's risky, because we want people to come. It's unknown repertoire, but that's our function. We have an almost public service obligation to bring to the public more difficult or neglected repertoire, and to hear the full body of work from particular composers. So it's a good time to do it. When I was planning it, I didn't realize that it was going to coincide with the anniversary. So we're going to launch a book here on Weinberg, and also look at the rest of his chamber music output.
And some impressive performing names: Andras Schiff, Bryn Tervel, Sheku Kane-Mason. He's a young cellist of the moment. Angela Hewitt. Tell me something about the performers who will be on this stage in the next season.
Well, Angela Hewitt continuing the Bach Odyssey, and also Mahan Esfahani in his keyboard works, and Rachel Podger across the season in Bach in 6 concerts, 3 of them on Sunday mornings and 3 evening concerts, focusing on the violin repertoire. So that's all very exciting and very important.
And Sheku Kane-Mason?
Yes,
again.
to bring him here in duo and also in chamber music. He's building up his reputation as a very fine chamber musician, so it's important that he has a platform here.
Tell me a little bit about your composer in residence.
Yes, Vijay Iyer he's a Harvard professor. He's a jazz pianist.
Jazz?
Yes, we have jazz on the Wigmore Hall stage. It's music without boundaries. It goes back to that point I made earlier, that music shouldn't have boundaries. And he will represent the whole idea of musicality, particularly in the Beethoven year. He's a great improviser, so I think Beethoven would have approved of that.
Yes.
And he's a wonderful teacher. He's mentoring some wonderful young composers in the States, and they'll be part of what we do here. And we'll work with Harvard and with Oxford. He lectures at both, and Oxford is very conveniently twinned with Bonn, so it all ties together.
I must ask you this, John. When I first started coming to this hall, more than 30 years ago, it did have a somewhat stuffy image. I thought, I better put a jacket and tie on or they'll be looking at me. And chamber music has always had a slightly elitist feel to it. Now, I know in your decade here, you've worked really hard to break all that down. How have you set about doing that?
Well, chamber music is just a conversation, really. If you listen to a string quartet, it's a conversation. And some of this, you could perceive it to be difficult repertoire. Certainly, late Beethoven, I don't think we're ever going to fully understand. We're not meant to.
Yes.
And you hear different interpretations, you hear fresh interpretations all the time of all this wonderful music. The most important thing is that we bring the best young musicians here and build them up.
And young audiences.
And young audiences, but also bring established masters. And as long as we're presenting the best people in the best repertoire, we can be huge advocates for the repertoire, and then beaming it all over the world.
Yes.
So Wigmore Hall now, by 3 or 4 times in the last month, we went live free of charge. So anybody, anywhere in the world, could tune in and watch what's happening here. You can almost see it better than when you're in the hall, because you see the faces on the string quartet. You're not just looking at the back of the head of a conductor if it's an early music group.
And that's actually happening now. We have a camera on that wall, a camera on that wall, a camera over there, and we will be beamed around this particular interview around the world.
Around the world. And young audiences are talking about us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. When we broadcast on Facebook in 2 or 3 minutes, we know that we've got 10 or 15,000 viewers almost immediately. Sometimes it goes into the hundreds of thousands. And obviously all the relationships, all of our broadcasting relationships are important. Our under 35 scheme, where we have 25,000 tickets available right across next season for anybody under the age of 35 at £5 in conjunction with Classic FM, is very important, as is the Cavatina Trust scheme, which across a number of concerts in the season allows under 25-year-olds in for nothing. So all of that helps, and we want this to feel like a home for everybody. Yes. We're unapologetic about putting on great music, but we want to make it available to everybody.
And when you say everybody, you mentioned just now young audiences. How young?
Well, sometimes we've got babes in arms or toddlers crawling up and down the aisle here. For Crying Out Loud is the name of that series, and they certainly do. It's a wonderful meeting point for the parents as well. Our chamber tots for the under 5s is copied all over the world now, where we mix storytelling with music making, and it really inspires young audiences. Our work with schools, our work with teenagers who are on the autistic spectrum, our work in care homes with people with dementia, our work, as I mentioned earlier, with the underprivileged, with the homeless, with refugees, with rehabilitated drug users at the Cardinal Hume Centre. Music is for everybody, and there's no such thing as a non-person. And again, the composer in residence, Vijay Iyer, will represent the idea of musicality and that we're all innately musical.
And John, I know you have plans to expand, because you don't have a lot of space here. You need to expand.
Well, at some point, if adjacent property became available, it would make life a bit easier because we just have 2 function rooms downstairs. We have the hall, which is wonderful. There's nowhere like it. But that's part of why we're increasing our fundraising. And
how would you pay for expansion?
Well, we're going to have to fundraise. And we're building an endowment. We've got the beginnings of a very good endowment. And certainly you will notice that we will raise up the ante in the next few years, possibly to the tune of 25 million or so, for both artistic and capital projects. But the artistic bit, that's £7 million a year, as I said, 4.5 million ticket sales, and the best part of 2.5 million then in funding.
And what are the ways that people can donate, the new ways that people can donate?
Well, there's an audience fund because it's always the last 100,000 that's the hardest to raise. So we get to 1.9 million, not easily, but we somehow get there. So there's an audience fund for smaller donations because every donation helps. And then there's a new director circle at the £25,000 level, and that's helped hugely. And a lot of people are interested in underpinning various positions here. So my position now has been very kindly sponsored. And I would say the positions in the learning department, the specialists who work with schools or with the Cardinal Hume Centre or with the homeless, all that work, or with people living with dementia, all of those positions can be sponsored individually. And it gets the audience a little bit closer to what's actually going on. Because this is a home for so many people, for musicians, the 2,000 musicians who perform here on this stage. Is astonishing across a year. And there will be 200 debuts next season. And we've had the Elias Quartet, and the Elias Quartet, and also Yeston Davies, who is 40 next year. We've helped build him up a lot over the past 10, 15 years. In a way, we discovered him. And
the Eliases as well.
Absolutely, through the Wigmore Hall Live, 5-star reviews for the latest of their Beethoven cycle. But helping young musicians find management, advising them on repertoire at various points in the career, giving them international profile through our own broadcasting, through our own digital means, all that, because it's not there, that the old infrastructure for young musicians is not there. So as a trust, as a charity, we're stepping in and helping in that essential development.
All right, John, we've talked a lot about the hall, about music and musicians. Let's talk about you. I read a review in last Sunday's Sunday Times of your Christmas programme, in which received brilliant reviews. You were described as a redoubtable director. Good word, redoubtable. What do you think it means?
Well, redoubtable to me is a dowager countess like Maggie Smith, so I'm not quite sure I fit that description. I think it means that I'm somebody who takes care of the place, I hope. And that's what we all have to do. And again, this morning, this is the Bernstein centenary, and I heard the lyrics to a song called Take Care of This House. Yes. And it goes something like, take care of this house, don't let bandits in, make it shine all over the world, mind it because it's everybody's dream. And most importantly, it's the home of us all. It's the home for musicians. It's the home for this very committed audience, for the staff, for the trustees. It's a family feel, but it's an international destination. And perhaps the best years have yet to come.
Yes, well, I think you've done a great job so far. It's a very different hall to the one that I knew 30 years ago. And we have our major supporters in the hall this afternoon. We know we're going to be watched online. Is there a single message that you would like Wigmore Hall supporters to take away with them as a result of this press conference?
Thank you is the most important thing. We couldn't have done it, and we can't continue to do this without you. We don't know what's ahead. We're lucky we've got a bit of a cushion, but we need to build that endowment. We need to be prepared to expand. We don't want to go back to the old days of hiring out the hall several hundred times a year, because we lose all the quality and all the thematic strength that I've been able to outline today. All that would go away, and you would have random concerts here and not the great sense, the great movement forward that we're able to do. And keep buying tickets. You're buying more tickets this season. I didn't think it was possible, but it's happening. And I think the work being done by our marketing department, particularly in the digital area, is central to new demographic coming in, and also just telling people about the under 35 scheme, breaking down any perceived barriers.
Yes.
Because most of it is about perception. This is a wonderful place. These are life-enhancing concerts, and let's make them available to anybody who wants them.
Yes, and a truly exciting year ahead, a Beethoven anniversary, all the composers we've mentioned now. I think the program looks absolutely wonderful. I would simply echo what John has said. The more tickets we can sell, the better. And it only remains really for me to thank you, John, for telling us about Wigmore Hall and the new era that it is now in, and to thank you, Wigmore Hall supporters, for your dedication to this wonderful venue, which I know John has described as the finest chamber music venue in the UK, I would say in Europe, if not the world. So thank you to all of you and those of you watching us online for your support today. And John, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.